Frida Kahlo is described by many titles: the pioneer, the queen of selfies, the queen of Bohemia, and perhaps most appropriate of all, the queen of suffering.
Shout my cousin, shout my brother, shout my side, shout my lover, shout my crusher, shout my grandma, shout my mother, shout my father, shout my Bronco, shout my buses, shout my winter, shout my summer, shout my haters.
Frida lived a life watered in fiction, mostly thanks to her husband, Diego Rivera. Their relationship was so historic that Mexico's 500 peso bill bore the face of Diego on the front and Frida's on the back. Frida famously said, "There have been two great accidents in my life. One was the trolley, and the other was Diego. Diego was by far the worst." What could have possibly happened for Frida to describe her encounter with her husband in this manner? Born on July 6, 1907 in Coyoacan, Mexico City, Frida's lifelong journey with suffering began early in her childhood. Having been afflicted by polio at the age of 6, she was left with a limp and a disfigured right foot, which would torment her both physically and mentally throughout her life, until finally, not long before her death, she would be forced to amputate it entirely at the age of 46. Even despite this unfortunate start to her life, Frida was not one to be easily discouraged. With the hopes of becoming a doctor, perhaps spurred on by her early encounter with physical disability, Frida entered high school at the Escuela Nacional Preparatoria in Mexico City as one of only 35 female students at the prestigious institution. However, fate would yet again deal a devastating blow to the bright-eyed adolescent. On September 17, 1925, at the budding age of 18, Frida boarded a bus with her fellow classmate and boyfriend, Alejandro Gomez Arias, oblivious to the fact that in mere minutes, the vehicle would smash into an incoming trolley car traveling at full speed. Frida recounted the incident as follows. "The streetcar crushed a bus against a street corner. It was a strange crash, not violent, but dull and slow, and it injured everyone, me much more seriously." This collision would fracture bones all over Frida's body and split her pelvic bone into multiple pieces, forever dashing out any dreams of bearing children. She was hospitalized for a month and had to be fitted with a plaster corset, variations of which she would wear throughout her life. And to add on another final straw, her relationship with Arias, her first boyfriend who had boarded the bus together with her on that gruesome day, came to an end. At this precarious precipice, at the peak of despair with her mind and body roiling in pain, Frida rose anew. She said, "I felt I still had enough energy to do something other than studying to become a doctor. And without giving it any particular thought, I started painting." Whether it was due to boredom or the guidance of fate, Frida started to paint portraits of herself. This was the start of the many self-portraits that would come to dominate Frida Kahlo's work. Frida said, "I paint myself because I'm so often alone and because I am the subject I know best." Although her reality was steeped in pain, her portraits always depict an unwaveringly strong woman, and this self-reassurance and visualization of her inner strength proved to be a remedy with immense healing capabilities. And what was her future husband, Diego Rivera, up to while the teenage Frida was beginning her journey as an artist? At the time, Diego was already over 40 years old and a nationally renowned painter. In 1910, when Frida was just 3 years old, the citizens of Mexico initiated a revolution, enraged by the corruption of the ruling classes. In the aftermath of the revolution, the people of Mexico were filled with dreams of creating a better future. The new revolutionary government looked for a great artist to proclaim its hopeful philosophies to the world, and so Diego Rivera began to adorn the walls of Mexico with murals of its noble history and its shimmering future. Soon, all the important landmarks of Mexico City would boast Diego's murals on its walls. Diego became a national superstar with his passion for art and his love for Mexico praised by all. Diego Rivera, Mexico's great artist, the renowned patriot, and lady killer? You see, Diego happened to be a serial womanizer and had already married and divorced 2 women before wedding Frida. Diego cheated on his first wife, the Russian-born Angelina Belov. Diego then went on to wed the Mexican model and novelist, Guadalupe Marin. This second marriage would also not last. and soon after divorcing Lupe, Diego took Frida as his third attempt at marriage. Frida and Diego, however, had already met long before their marriage in her teenage years. One night in 1922, Diego was painting his mural, Creation, at the Escuela Nacional Preparatoria up on the scaffolding, and his then-wife Lupe was working below. Then, as they were painting, they heard a loud commotion. Diego described the encounter as follows. All at once, the door flew open, and a girl who seemed to be no more than 10 or 12 was propelled inside. It was the 15-year-old Frida, fearless and magnetic. She was dressed like any other high school student, but her manner immediately set her apart. She had unusual dignity and self-assurance, and there was a strange fire in her eyes. And thus a fateful spark had been lit between these two electric spirits. On top of being artistic inspirations for each other, Frida and Diego were political comrades. They were both members of the Mexican Communist Party and dedicated their lives to creating a new Mexico. Frida would later endeavor to rediscover Mexico's cultural heritage, which had been largely demolished following the Spanish colonization in the 16th century. Her love for her country is evidenced through her works such as My Nurse and I and Roots. Diego, too, would paint numerous grand murals depicting the nation's fettered history and cultural origins. A detail on one of these murals hint at how much Diego cherished Frida. Her image is drawn squarely in the center of the arsenal, which depicts the impassioned revolutionaries of the time. And so the two would get married 1 year after Diego's divorce with Lupe. Frida's parents were strongly against their marriage. By this time, Frida was 21 and Diego already 43. Diego had a complicated relationship history, to say the least. Frida's parents lamented that the couple looked like the union of an elephant and a pigeon, but their romance could not be stopped. After their wedding, Frida began to undergo many changes. She began to wear the iconic traditional Tijuana clothing, which Diego is said to have adored, and she would eventually lay down her brush in order to focus all her efforts on supporting Diego, who was already a champion within political and artistic circles. Her work Frida and Diego Rivera from this period clearly shows her perception of their relationship. Frida is shown as small and timid, while Diego stands large as the national painter that he is. On the other hand, Diego became busier than ever. As a workaholic, he spent all his time outside of eating and sleeping on working on his murals. Although married, Frida barely got to spend time with Diego. Within this environment of disinterest from her husband, Frida bore her first child. Now, it would have been extremely difficult for Frida to birth a child given her trolley accident earlier in her life, but Frida was determined to try. Unfortunately, this first pregnancy ended up in miscarriage. 2 years later, she tried once more, but once again, she would not be able to keep her child. While Frida was lying in bed, drenched in pain, Diego, her ever-absent partner, would approach her with a small gift, a pen and a piece of paper. And for the first time in 3 years, Frida began to draw again, and this time with more fervor than ever before. She took the many fragments of her suffering and began to imprint them on paper one by one. Thus came the first monumental piece, Henry Ford Hospital, subtitled The Flying Bed, which depicts her miscarriage at the hospital she was admitted to at the time. The flying bed shows Detroit's cold industrial area in the background, a desolate barren land under a hazy blue sky, and Frida bleeding profusely on a hospital bed with tears streaming down her face. And around her floats all the objects that have caused immeasurable pain to her. A male fetus, which is the child that she longed to have with Diego. A teaching model of female reproductive anatomy. An orchid, which resembles the uterus. A snail, which symbolizes the length of time it took for her to miscarry. A piece of steel gray medical equipment. And a human pelvic bone. All of these totems are tethered to her belly through red ribbon threads which resemble umbilical cords. A woman whose only wish was to be a mother, but was denied. The painting in no uncertain terms emits an uneasy sensation of misery. And in watching Frida pour her heart into her artworks, Diego said the following, in a manner more akin to an art critic rather than a loving husband. She is the only artist in the history of art who tore open her chest and heart to reveal the biological truth of her feelings. Childhood illness, teenage accident, and now 2 miscarriages. Would Frida's pain ever end? Not yet, it would seem. And the next strike came from close by. Within a few years of their marriage, Diego's womanizing nature had begun to rear its head once more. This time, the target was neither a friend of a friend nor a friend of his wife. It was none other than Frida's younger sister, Frida Kahlo. Even the timing of their affair was heart-wrenching. Their relationship had started during the time when Frida had her second miscarriage in 1932. And what did Diego have to say for himself? If I ever loved a woman, the more I loved her, the more I wanted to hurt her. Frida was only the most obvious victim of this disgusting trait. What kind of twisted logic was this? Diego tore deep into Frida's aching heart. And again, she picked up her brush and sent Diego a weighty piece of her mind. A few small nips. It was the scene of a gruesome crime. A man who holds a bloody knife. A woman, the victim of his knife, lying bare under him with countless stab wounds. Even the picture frame is splattered with bloodstains. This painting is said to have been inspired by a grisly murder case in Mexico at the time, where a husband had murdered his wife in cold blood. The murderer had stated in court that he had only stabbed her a few times, unos cuantos piquetitos, and so Frida saw Diego as just as ruthless of an assailant. After all, as Diego himself had said so nonchalantly, Frida was only the most obvious victim. And the only appropriate response to Diego would be to fight fire with fire. And so Frida began an affair with the critically acclaimed sculptor Isamu Noguchi, who had arrived in Mexico to help work on a pictorial project which Diego Rivera was managing. When Diego discovered their relationship, he reportedly confronted Isamu, seething with rage. He pointed a pistol at his wife's lover, threatening him that if he ever saw Isamu again, he would pull the trigger. It looks like someone couldn't tolerate the taste of their own medicine. But nevertheless, that is how Frida's first affair came abruptly to a close. But if all of the things that we learned about Frida have taught us anything, it is that Frida is not one to go home crying, licking her wounds. She was not done with her revenge, and she would take it one notch higher. Frida found the perfect target. Her next lover was the legendary communist revolutionary of Russia, Leon Trotsky. Leon in his 50s was someone that Diego respected very much. In fact, Diego had eagerly volunteered his help when Leon was looking to flee from Russia to Mexico. And now Frida and Leon had become secret lovers, with Frida even gifting a self-portrait of herself to Leon. But Frida and Leon's relationship would also not last. This was because Leon would not separate official matters from his private life and would openly discriminate against Diego when working with him. When Frida came to hear of this, she became furious, calling Leon an old man. And here we catch a glimpse of the unwavering affection that Frida held for Diego, despite all his transgressions against her. Frida's next lover arrived under the romantic name of Nicholas Murray, a charming photographer from New York. They would first meet in Mexico, but Frida would also travel back and forth between Mexico City and New York, where Nick resided. Throughout their relationship, Nicholas and Frida would send each other many passionate love letters. Frida would write, "I really should not complain about anything that happens to me in life, so long as you love me and I love you. This love is so real and beautiful that it makes me forget all my pain and problems." At the time, Nicholas was one of the most popular photographers in America, having photographed the likes of Marilyn Monroe, Martha Graham, and Greta Garbo. And he would also produce beautiful portraits of his lover Frida. We can get a sense of how much Nicholas adored Frida through the tender care with which he framed his shots. At last, it seemed like Frida had finally met someone that she could share a genuine bond with. However, at the end of 1939, Nicholas would part ways with Frida, leaving behind a heartfelt, bittersweet letter. "Of the three of us, there was only two of you, and I always felt that. Your tears told me that when you heard his voice. The one of me is eternally grateful for the happiness that the half of you so generously gave." While Frida may have set out in having affairs with other partners to inflict a corresponding amount of pain to Diego, it seemed that she had not forgotten him. Thus, it had become clear to Nicholas that while they shared an intimate connection, Frida's attachment to Diego left no room for any other permanent relationships. And as it would have it, Frida's retaliation would be achieved not through romantic escapades, but through artistic domination. In 1938, after 12 years of painting, Frida held her first exhibition in Mexico City, as part of a collaborative exhibit put on by a group of artists. It was here that her paintings caught the eyes of the surrealist artist André Breton, who offered to arrange for Frida's first solo exhibition at the Julien Levy Gallery in New York City. And what did Frida say after receiving this fantastic offer? "Why are they asking me to do an exhibit? I don't know what part of my artwork they find so valuable." It's apparent that the thought of making money had never crossed her mind when she began to paint. For Frida, creating art was a natural instinct. It allowed her to soothe her pain and have honest conversations with herself. In any case, her solo exhibition in New York would be an instant hit, captivating the hearts of New Yorkers in a single stroke. Her art would decorate the front page of Times magazine, and upon seeing her paintings fly off the walls into the hands of avid fans, a simple, empowering fact would make itself clear to Frida. As she said, "This way I am going to be able to be free. I'll be able to travel and do what I want without asking Diego for money." Finally, Frida could claim her own identity, standing free from the looming shadow of her husband, the national muralist Diego Rivera. Truthfully, the speed at which Frida's fame spread across the globe was astonishing. Within just 1 year of holding her first group exhibition in Mexico City, Frida would go on to hold an exhibit in the epicenter of all things art, Paris. At this showing, her works would garner praises from masters such as Picasso, Kandinsky, and Juan Miro. Actually, Picasso would even gift her a pair of beautiful earrings. Could it be that he was captivated by more than just her artwork? Even the Louvre would decide to purchase one of her portraits, making her the first female artist from Central and South America to make it into the prestigious museum. And then Frida would draw a monumental tour de force which would cement her position amongst the greatest artists of the world, the two Fridas. Here sits twin copies of Frida, their hearts connected by an elongated blood vessel. The Frida on the right wears a characteristic traditional Tijuana clothing and holds a small portrait of Diego. This portrait then connects to her heart through another blood vessel. In contrast, the Frida on the left wears a European-style white dress and has severed the other end of her blood vessel, cinching it tight with a pair of forceps. She speaks clearly to us. The Frida of the past who resided in Mexico held on to Diego as if it was part of her heart. The Frida of the present, the woman who has been born again as an independent, world-renowned artist, will cut Diego off of her, even if that entails the excruciating pain of severing her own blood vessel. Isn't it amazing how this painting stands in such stark contrast to her self-image when she painted Frida and Diego Rivera? There was an unflinching rawness to the pain that Frida poured onto her canvas that struck a chord amongst its viewers across borders and generations. If Frida had set out to settle her score with Diego, then she had completely achieved that goal. Her renown had far surpassed her husband, and she had become an international star, beloved across the globe. But ironically, Frida may not have been able to blossom into one of the greatest artists of the 20th century if she had not met Diego. That pivotal first exhibit in 1938, where Frida was first discovered, was one that was led by Diego. Although the two maintained a frigid relationship following his infidelity, Diego must have believed that Frida's artistic talent was too valuable to be wasted collecting dust at home. In fact, he is reported to have been ecstatic upon hearing the news that Frida's Paris exhibit was a smashing success. What's more, we can't discount the fact that Frida's position as the wife of Diego Rivera provided many advantages in garnering the interests of the art community. And finally, would we have been able to have the pleasure of appreciating Frida's masterpieces without her having met Diego? As a husband, Diego surely had a failing grade, but the impassioned chaos that he brought into Frida's life provided a fertile substrate for her artistic spirit to thrive. Perhaps it was only fate that these two blazing souls came to cross paths.